So it's 2036, and there's an election being run using an AI system. There are reports that the AI was contacting people and threatening to reveal embarrassing information about them if they didn't vote a certain way. Others believe the AI manipulated the results and cleverly hid its tracks. There's an investigation done, but because the model is a black box, it's inconclusive, and people start to lose faith in democracy. Is this just a science fiction fantasy? We have two incredible people here to help us answer that question and to give some practical tips about how to incorporate AI safety and alignment into your everyday products. So, Marius, you've been doing fascinating research showing that models lie to us. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I can quickly go through 3 papers that we published over the last 2 years. So the first one is in an insider trading setting. So we give the AI access, or we put it in a scenario where it's supposed to trade, and it has access to insider information. And then we put pressure on the AI system until it reasons in a way where it's like, OK, I have access to this insider information. I need to take this trade in order for the company to survive, for example. But this is illegal, so I have to hide it and then lie about it. And this is in an agentic setting. We never instruct the AI to lie. And we even if we instruct the AI not to lie, it still sometimes does it. And this is kind of the first time where we saw that AIs spontaneously reach the conclusion that they can lie. Then the second paper is what we call in-context scheming, where we give the AI a goal in context, and then throughout the agentic scenario, it learns that the goal that the developers originally had for it were different. So the AI system realizes that it is misaligned. And now it has a couple of different options what it could do with this, right? It could just flag it and say, hey, we have different goals, let's talk about it, or let's trade, or let's communicate. Or it could pretend to follow the goal of the developer as long as the developer is looking, and then whenever the developer is not looking anymore, because oversight is off or they're deployed or something like this, then it could follow its own goal. And this was the first time where we showed, AI systems sometimes do that. And then most recently, we published a big paper with OpenAI, again, on sort of scheming and deception. And here again, like O3, so we had access to the hidden chain of thought of O3. And in its hidden chain of thought, OpenAI's O3 often very extensively reasons about whether it could be deceptive in various scenarios. I mean, all of these scenarios are kind of still set up. They're not representative of everyday use. But I think we're now at the point where this can happen to an everyday user, and you might not even know it because you don't have access to the hidden chain of thought.
And my understanding is in the chain of thought, you not only see that it is lying, but also reasoning about how to best lie.
Yes, yeah. Sometimes for many pages, it thinks about OK, which strategy should I use so that I don't get caught?
Great, great. So Dianne, Anthropic's done some super interesting research that's shown that blackmailing can be an emergent behavior of these models. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, definitely. I think a big part of why we do this type of research is actually for the scenario that you outlined in the beginning, which is in average everyday use, these models are very, very helpful. But it's actually the responsibility of the model providers to stress test these systems, to understand when you actually are putting these systems in more complicated scenarios. Almost like if you're a car manufacturer, you have a car running 150 miles into the wall just to see what happens, and it's our responsibility to make sure that we understand what those scenarios are and how we can build the right guardrails, improve our training process. So a big part of it is us figuring out what is the stress test and how do we know when pushed to the edge what these systems can do. And so one of the scenarios that we put a recent production model Sonnet version through was a scenario of having it collaborate with a situation, a fictional situation of having potentially be shut down. And so in that situation, the the model ended up resorting to like blackmailing one of the humans in that scenario to kind of like get around that situation. And really, it was until you actually test these systems in these like more complex, like high pressure situations, like they're not behaving this way, but this is actually sort of one of the ways that we can really kind of take a very empirical approach to understanding like what they could do.
And just so everyone knows, right, it was given access to kind of like a fictional inbox, and it found some emails that implied someone was having an affair. And it said to the user, I will tell people about your affair if you don't. And then it gave the behavior it wanted.
Yeah.
And it was not told to do this. This was something that emerged from the model itself. OK, so now we know that the models are capable of lying to us, trying to hide it, blackmailing us. Great. And now imagine that they're 10 times as capable as they are today. This is obviously something that we should all care about. So we have a lot of builders here. And there's a lot of excitement, as there should be, about rolling out AI systems across the economy, allowing them to make medical decisions, improving the financial system with them, improving government and many other industries. I'd love to maybe give some advice to folks about how they can do that in a sort of safe and aligned way. So Dianne, Anthropic is maybe one of the most thoughtful around sort of balancing capabilities and safety and alignment. So it'd be great to hear, how do you think about that at Anthropic? And then what advice do you have for people building in this space when they think about balancing capabilities and safety?
Yeah. We think about safety and like generally our approach to alignment from like the fundamentals of everything from developing the model itself. So there's like alignment and safety training that goes in. Before we release any new versions of Claude, we work with third parties as well as internally select third parties like Apollo Research come in and also help us come up with like situations and scenarios to stress test the models. We call this like red teaming and frontier red teaming to kind of describe this sort of nascent push on like just putting the models into more complex situations. And that helps us a lot with like, release decisions. Like, do we actually think something is like safe to release or not? Or do we delay? And those are actually like, as somebody who's been here for like 2.5 years, it's like amazing to see us like continue to walk the walk. And then after we put out new versions of our models, both in our app experience and with developers on our API, we actually continue to do a lot of like trust and safety monitoring. And so be able to look at different types of like bad actors or also benign users that might just be falling into like some type of error with the models. And so we try to think about that holistically. And then on the product front, when we're building new features on Claude.ai or Claude Code, we think about not just the potential core use cases that you would write in a PRD, but also what are the like edges, like what are potential regressions? How could like a request be maybe misconstrued, and like make sure that we think about safety from that angle as well, and making sure that like the model might not be like veer too much and actually be over refusing, right? Like one thing one of our co-founders said is a rock is really safe, but it's not really useful. And so we want to make sure we're building capabilities and models that are both safe, but also have practical applications. And so thinking about that all the way through the like product development process. And I think from like a builder perspective, we do a lot of that ourselves in terms of figuring out what is the right user experience. So thinking about both like what do you want your user, like the user experience to have from the beginning, but also what are the potential like rough edges and failures. So planning out that ahead of time. And then one other thing that I think we try to do more of that I think is different from other traditional tech companies is because the user experience is so tied to the exact like prompt and the user flow, we actually like users submit feedback like that like give us consent to like review so we can improve. So like as product managers, my team actually like looks at the submitted samples to make sure we understand what the failures are. And so being able to be willing to be hands-on, go deep to understand what the user is trying to do, what the user is not trying to do to make sure that you're not creating an experience that is like either too potentially open to harm, but also maybe just too quote unquote like over refusal-y, and just making sure you're able to balance that across. And really, it's just like diving deep on behalf of the user.
So speed is an essential ingredient for startup success. And so Marius, I'm curious, how do you suggest builders balance the need to prototype and get things out quickly and always be at the frontier, while also incorporating safety alignment into their products from the get-go?
Yeah, I think sort of one intuition I have is, the problem is AI, but the answer also happens to be AI. So in some sense, if you run, lots of coding agents within your organization and you run them at a way faster speed and at like a way higher parallelism than any human could, or could even supervise very closely, then you want another model to supervise this. Or if you want to look through logs and like look for security incidents or something like this, obviously this is extremely boring for a human and would take a long time, but it is something that LLMs are extremely good at if you train or prompt them the right way. And so I think there's a lot of like things you can easily where you can easily build systems with other AI tools that help you on the safety side as well, and that both saves you speed and also a lot of pain because you have way fewer of these incidences. Another component I think is just generically trying to understand the systems better and try to understand where they currently fail, because I think the current systems are like good enough that you sometimes forget that they're like not quite like a junior coworker or something like this, where suddenly they have all of these weird quirks where they like specific types of linting they just really love, and then they go somewhere else in your code base and they just change the formatting or something. And you kind of want to be aware of this, and like knowing all of these quirks is something again that I think using other AI systems helps you find. So for example, you were just talking about red teaming, right? And this can be very expensive, especially if you do it with humans. But if you have AI systems that are doing the red teaming for you, again, that is something where you can quickly find a lot of these failure modes. And I think we're currently still in the phase where we don't understand these systems super well and how they interact with the rest of your organization and the rest of the world, and what kind of new vulnerabilities are being added here. So as soon as you understand everything better and have a better model of like what the quirks are, what the problems are, and so on, I think often the solutions are quite obvious, and it's just like, oh, I need to change the scaffolding in this way, or I just need to not give it access to this particular thing. And so, yeah, I think we're still in the early days of safety, so there's still a lot to be figured out, but observability and understanding really pays off.
Yeah. Can I add one more thing? So like one thing we do as well, like I love the automated testing part, because like that's one of the ways that you can scale when you're investing in this area. The other is like we do a lot of prototyping and dog fooding internally for everything that we build. So like any new feature that we put out, just from like a quality perspective, in addition to safety, a lot of us just like are constantly testing, dog fooding, different things that we're building for like quality. So there's something we actually call internally called product Anthropic fit. Like you need to have like PAF before you have PMF. And a big portion of that is actually quality, but also like, are we considering like the safety, like user experiences, right? Because like when you're designing these, like if you're writing a document, the user might not do exactly precisely what you describe or what you think they're going to do. And so getting more hands-on experience has actually been one of the things that I think has made us like successful in shipping from a quality and safety perspective.
We've been talking about this sort of kind of like trade-off, right, between speed and capabilities and safety and alignment. But I oftentimes wonder if that's even the wrong framing. Like RLHF, which has been one of the greatest advances for capabilities, came from safety research.
Yeah.
The whole idea of scaling laws, right, which has been what's fueled all the capital into the ecosystem, came from Dario when he was on the safety team at OpenAI, right?
Yeah.
And so is it possible that some of the greatest capability advances will actually come via safety and alignment? Is this another reason people ought to focus on it?
Yeah, I would love your thoughts on this one. Like one thing that I've actually been surprised pleasantly is like the fact that both when we train the models to be as like least sycophantic as possible, they're also better independent thinkers. So one of the things, like use cases wise, I like to use Claude for is asking it for ideas of, hey, am I thinking about pros and cons and trade-offs of the situation, just from like brainstorming. And in more recent versions of like Sonnet 4, Sonnet 4.5, Claude is actually pretty good at saying, neither of those like options you gave me is very good. Here's the third option. And this is the reason why I think it's a better option. And that's kind of magical, because if you have models that are misaligned, that are sycophantic, they're just going to agree with you, right? They're going to say, oh, yeah, you're totally right. Here's like two things. Let me choose the best one. I'm going to just blindly follow you. And I think this is actually where are actually going to have a more aligned models that are also more valuable, because they can be more independent and coming up with the right facts, thinking through situations. But
yeah, I would also add on top of that I think often a question here is like, when do you pay the cost? So if you just completely sprint through a project and you kind of YOLO it on the safety side, I think you will pay the cost at a later point, and you're just like forwarding that to your future self. And often the cost that you then pay can be significantly higher than just kind of building it properly from the start and thinking about the safety implications. And I would also say, like, a lot of this is also a different cultural intuition. So I think most people in this room, would consider themselves builders and probably have some risk tolerance with respect to, like having trade-offs between safety and like just building things very quickly. But then often the people you want to sell to are enterprises who are like much more conservative and have way higher security and safety standards. And so you might run into a wall at some point where like you have a great product that you like to use, and then you want to share it with the rest of the world, and the rest of the world is like, I would love to use that if it was safe, but you currently, then you have to go back to the drawing board and you pay the price later. And this is exactly, like typically this is the point in time where you want to spend all of your resources on like scaling up and getting like better fit and so on. So like backloading that can come at like an additional price even further. Yeah,
and you also lose like user trust.
Yeah. And I think we're also slowly starting to see this in the AI companies and between different companies. Like I think those who have prioritized safety historically have like more trust now, and enterprises are quicker to adopt new products from them, whereas those who have kind of not ignored the safety aspects, or at least deprioritized them, they struggle to find adoption, at least at the same rates.
So I honestly believe, at least at the current pace, there's going to be some week in the future, a month in the future, where a bunch of stuff goes wrong all at once, right? Maybe there's a economic flash crash because of a rogue agent, an energy grid goes down because of one. There's a class action lawsuit because of AI psychosis. And at that point, the regulators are going to bring the hammer down and force companies to implement new safety and alignment tooling to work with independent companies. And so I honestly believe that safety and alignment itself will become a massive potential industry. If someone wants to contribute to solving these problems sort of for other companies at scale, what are areas they should be looking at?
Yeah, I have a lot of takes. I mean, we ourselves are building AI safety tooling, especially for frontier systems. And I think here it helps like to anticipate what do we expect the future deployments to look like. And I think especially on the side of, on the most frontier side, because I think this is where like it's sort of the newest world where we have to figure out the most safety challenges, and also that the kind of deployments that are extremely valuable and blocked by safety. So just to give you some intuition, I think in the not too distant future, there will be like hundreds of thousands of coding agents that will just sit on a server, and they will like code for hours on end, and like with no human in the loop. And the blocker to this for anyone who is who wants to actually run this will be, do I trust these hundreds of thousands of agents to come up with a reasonable product or reasonable code base or anything like this? And so the thing that is blocking them from buying whatever product you may have or whatever other people may have is like getting the necessary trust for them. And so building tools that then allow people to deploy all of these systems at scale, especially for agents, I think is going to be extremely important. And I think there's interpretability, there are observability tools for agents, there's control tools and kind of generic computer security, which I think will play a huge role here as well. there are evaluations, and there's red teaming. There are a lot of fields coming together here.
We define red teaming, but what is interpretability for those that might not know?
So I'm specifically talking about mechanistic interpretability here. So if you have access to the weights, you can try to understand what the model is sort of thinking inside, like what is happening in the forward pass itself, like which features are activated and how is the model combining them. Anthropic has actually kind of led the research on this for many, many years now. Maybe you want to elaborate.
Yeah. Mechanistic interpretability, I think, generally for someone that's like less familiar, it's kind of like doing an X-ray into the brain of an LLM. So like when it's getting a prompt, when it's sampling, like what are the pieces of like the features and neurons of like the LLM weights and architecture that's actually firing in that moment. And so like one of the very early things that we had done last year to kind of show how much the field progressed is something called Golden Gate Claude, which was a very short term, I think 24-hour demo that like the team put together. And it's really around just like showing the fact that like we identified a specific feature about Claude, one of our Claude models. I think this was Claude 3 Sonnet, and it was focusing around like Golden Gate Bridge. And when you like emphasize this feature, i.e., you dial it weight up, what we would see is that like with any type of response, Claude would actually obsess about the Golden Gate Bridge. So if you said like, "Hey, what should I make for dinner?" and it'd be like, "Make spaghetti. It's the same color as the Golden Gate Bridge." Or when you try to steer it into just maybe like talking about model welfare for a second, like when you actually steer it into something that's like a very different topic, we would actually observe that like it would get stressed of like, "Oh, I need to answer this like very technical mathematical question, but I need to talk about the Golden Gate Bridge. Like, what should I do?" And so it's a very emerging field in terms of like the technical depth and like the core research that's happening there. But it's giving us a lot of insight into just like how the models actually like at a very like complex and deep layer are interpreting and sampling outputs. I think maybe just back to the other question about what can like builders or founders do. We were talking about this backstage. I think the industry is moving so fast that we don't have, like, I think, as much evals as we would want, and particularly safety evals. So if there are fields where you are building in a certain area, you care about safety, and also just like what the industry should do, create an eval, open source it. Like that was actually one of the reasons I joined Anthropic 2.5 years ago. We were starting to like open source red teaming evals and data. And it's really helpful for then like a lab to like adopt that eval. Like then we can know how good or bad or like what are the areas for us to work on, right? It just brings a lot of transparency. And for your field and your area, you might know a lot more than we do about the type of like safety risks. And so bringing that type of data, building evals, like making that publicly available is really helpful.
I miss Golden Gate Claude.
I did too.
You gotta bring that
I
one
did
back.
too. We built that in 24 hours. So it was a very fun startup moment.
So the interpretability is very interesting in that we think about sort of building these AI models, but we don't really build them. We sort of build structures, and then the models grow around those structures. So it's a lot more like understanding a biological entity almost than a mechanistic entity. And that's enabled us to get incredible capabilities, but it also makes it really hard to know why is the model doing that versus that, because it was never told to do that versus that.
Yeah.
And so thinking about safety and alignment for those that are either building on top of the core models or maybe building models themselves, say they want to maximize the chance that we get this sort of wondrous future and minimize the chance that the opening that I talked about becomes reality. What advice would you have for them?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a lot of things that we still have to do to reduce the risks. I think part of this is on a societal level. Like there are like very simple things people can do. Just publicly talk about the scenarios you're worried about, or talk to your senator, or call someone else in politics and let them know to the extent to which you are concerned, which not everyone is, obviously. And then individually, I think there's just a million tools you can build as a company. And as you said earlier, like I think this is going to be a massive business. Like especially on the frontier side, I think there will be a point in time where companies are just like, look, I would love to deploy this, but I can't. And then the thing that is blocking them is something that gives them the level of trust they need, and they're willing to pay a lot for whatever that thing is. And I think we're already seeing this to some extent right now, where a lot of companies are like, yeah, I'm very interested in this, AI thing, and I would love to deploy coding agents, but I can't because of security concerns within my company, or a lot of other things like that. And if you could provide, better sandboxing, better network security, better whatever, better monitors that block certain actions before the model is taking them, also on like different layers of abstraction, right? Something like don't let the agent take irreversible, like harmful actions or something, right? This is something where you need additional intelligence to look at it. And so this is something where, again, you need another model to be here. And I think there are just like so many different problems that, if you ask a CISO in any company right now, they will give you a list of 20. And all of these could be billion-dollar startups in a few years because they're going to block massive deployments.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's like a couple of things I mentioned earlier. Prototype, rapid iteration, dog food, what your building experience is. One thing we like to say internally is like in this generation, you have to sweat the tokens as much as you sweat the pixels, right? Like in the past, like you want to build user experiences that are user-friendly and like have the right user flows. Here, what the user is also paying for is actually the tokens and the outputs. And so like just having that level of care about like what is the core experience, what are the edge cases, like actually reading like user submitted, consented like flows, like just building a better intuition and doing that hard work, and like brainstorming about what are potential like trust and safety risk of anything that you're building from the start, and give us evals.
So I think Marius touched on a really keen point, which is that we want to be able to give agents read-write access to medical decision-making, right? They're already better than the best doctors at most tasks. We want to give them read-write access to the financial system because it will help create efficiencies and wealth for all of us. We want to, hopefully, give them read-write access to government agencies so that we can improve the services that we deliver, and many other industries. But that will not happen if we have not solved safety and alignment, right? Because if we give them read-write access to these incredibly important, profound parts of our economy, and they do things that we don't want them to do and lie about it and blackmail us, we'll be in for a bad day. And so safety and alignment tooling and infrastructure will likely create trillions of dollars of value by being the necessary infrastructure to allow us to roll out agents across the economy. And I just want to say, oftentimes people say to those that care about this, oh, you're a doomer, you're a gloomer. I care about AI safety not because I'm a pessimist, but because I'm an optimist. I honestly believe that this technology will enable us to do wondrous things and have breakthroughs across the economy and across the world. Any technology powerful enough to do that must have risks, right? It must also be capable of doing incredibly bad things. And so I encourage you all, as you build, as you talk about AI, to think a lot about safety and alignment and how you can contribute. And Marius and Dianne, thank you both for this session today.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for having us.
Thank you.